So I've always been a sucker for pirate games. I remember playing Buccaneer, which was a 1997 release. I was playing it a lot when I was a little kid. So there's always going to be some sort of like pirate bias within me. And for the most part, I did thoroughly enjoy the Skull and Bones gameplay, but that does not stop it being a failure of a release. So in this video, we're going to go through the development. I'm going to show you some gameplay for Black Flag as well, because that's been a big talking point since the release of Skull and Bones. And we're going to go into detail about how Skull and Bones was doomed from the very beginning. From the start of it, it was never going to be a big game. So Skull and Bones is the very first video game that's led by developer Ubisoft Singapore, and it drew inspiration from the naval battles of Assassin's Creed Black Flag. The game began development in 2013, being initially envisioned as an expansion of Black Flag. Then it went to an MMO spin-off under the name Black Flag Infinite, and it was then spun off again as an independent project, in part due to its initial technology becoming outdated. And they had announcements and everything for the game, and they was telling people how it's inspired by Black Flag. Like, that's where they got the inspiration from. So the question is, why are there so many features that lack even from the 2013 release of Assassin's Creed Black Flag? And what I'm going to do is put some gameplay in the background. You are going to be able to see the ship boarding in Black Flag, and it's like miles ahead of Skull and Bones, with there being an 11-year difference between the two games, with Skull and Bones being the more recent release. So you'll get to see your character actually swing across to the enemy ship. You get on board, and there is actually hand-to-hand combat. You have melee combat against the enemies of the ship, and once you have defeated all of the crew, that is boarding successful. You tie them up, and basically that is the ship dealt with. Whereas if we now go to Skull and Bones gameplay of ship boarding, there is absolutely nothing to see. You get a prompt that pops up on your screen saying crew boarding. You then follow through with the prompt, and all you see is a brief cutscene of you using your ropes or whatever to pull the enemy ship towards you, and that is pretty much it. You gather the loot and you're on your way. And when you create an expectation for players when you're announcing and revealing a game, if you fall back on the expectation you've set, then people are not going to be happy. And with people expecting this to still continue to take inspiration from Assassin's Creed Black Flag, to then get the gameplay we actually got for Skull and Bones, people are going to be annoyed. Like, people have already been saying in masses that they were lied to and the game's an absolute shambles. And Skull and Bones, it went through multiple changes in its direction and its scope during development. It wasn't just going from being initially seen as an expansion for Black Flag to then go into a spin-off MMO to then getting its own IP. It went through a lot more, and it exceeded its budget multiple times. It was initially set in the Caribbean, it was then moved to Hyperborea, and then finally East Africa and Southeast Asia. The gameplay was redesigned multiple times. Every time this game was essentially re-announced, the game looked completely different. And being redesigned, the focus was variously on naval exploration and ship-to-ship combat. And that's just one reason amongst the many as to why this game was doomed, from the very beginning. Because even with a gigantic focus on naval exploration and ship-to-ship combat, the game still lacks a lot of features that you would expect in a game with that vision. Developers ended up being contacted by a journalist, and they attributed the difficulties to conflicting ideas, management issues, and a lack of consistent direction. The project also reportedly cost Ubisoft $200 million to create. The game was revealed during Ubisoft's press conference at E3 2017. It was confirmed for Windows, PS4 and Xbox One, with enhancements for the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X. And alongside the game, Ubisoft Singapore announced the Keepers of the Code program, which was designed to allow players to aid in the fine-tuning of its live service aspects. Because as always with releases nowadays, especially the big ones, it's a live service game. And with Skull and Bones originally set to being released in Q3, Q4 2018, the game was later delayed into 2019. And then again to sometime after March 2020. And on a call with investors in October of 2019, the CEO for Ubisoft, Yves Guillermo, or however you say his name, we'll just call him Yves. Yves confirmed that the game had been pushed back to at least the 2021 to 22 fiscal year. And then in September 2020, it was revealed that while development was continuing, a new vision for the game had emerged, which resulted in release delays as more development time was needed. Additionally, it was stated that additional Ubisoft studios, such as Berlin, were co-developing the game alongside Singapore. Then in May 2021, Ubisoft announced a subsequent delay to the 2022-23 fiscal year, and later that July, it was reported that the game could not be cancelled due to receiving large subsidies from the Singapore government. And I remember people talking about the ties with the government and everything, like the game physically could not be cancelled because there were issues like involving the government within Singapore. But then in July 2022, the company revealed a November 8 release date for the game, and that the game would launch on the PS5 and the Series X, replacing the PS4 and the Xbox One. But then, however, 2 months later, Ubisoft announced that the release was pushed back yet again to the 9th of March 2023. And then in January 2023, they delayed the game again to the 2023-24 fiscal year due to the underperformance of recent launches. And I mean, ever since then, like even way before then, Ubisoft has been going downhill with their releases. But yeah, they delayed it again due to underperformance of their recent launches. However, new footage for the game was released. A closed beta was released on the 25th of August 2023. And in October 2023, it was announced that the game would be released in early 2024. Then at the Game Awards 23, the final release date of Feb 16th was revealed. If you got a bigger edition, you got 3 days early access, meaning you could play from Feb 13th. And the CEO of Ubisoft strikes again. Eves justified the $70 price tag of Skull and Bones, emphasizing its status as a quadruple A game. And that really pissed off a lot of people. And that was also despite incorporating live service elements like an in-game store, battle pass, seasonal events, and premium currency. So yeah, $200 million, a decade-long development, and Ubisoft didn't even expect it to break even, which is where it gets worse because the critical reception for the game, it received mixed or average reviews. The review scores range between like 4 and 7 out of 10 from like your major publications, your IGNs, your GameSpots, so on and so forth. Whereas if you go to Metacritic, overall for PC it got a 58, PS5 it got a 59, Xbox Series X, S, it got a 63. However, the user score, it got a 3.4. So it is not very good in terms of the critical reception it had. And then when it comes to sales in the United Kingdom, Skull and Bones reached 4th place in the weekly boxed charts. The game's sales were less than a quarter of Sea of Thieves when it launched in 2018. And according to Insider Gaming, the game has accumulated around 850,000 players, including those who have played the free trial, as of Feb 22, 2024. So the 22nd of Feb, 2024. So yeah, there were a lot of talks about a week after the game released, there wasn't even 1 million players. And yeah, that included people that were playing the free trial, because alongside the release, Ubisoft gave people a free trial to test out the game and see if they liked it. And yeah, with the release and the free trial, they still couldn't accumulate 1 million players. And that's not concurrent, that's overall. And that's across every platform too. So with it starting off in 2013, initially supposed to be an expansion of Black Flag, players had that expectation set the whole time. And you can see the gameplay difference. Yes, it looks a lot more modern, the graphics are better, but the gameplay actually lets you have hand-to-hand combat when you're boarding enemy ships, instead of in 2024, it just simply being a cutscene. And this game started off as supposed to be like an MMO spin-off, or an expansion for Black Flag. It then went to be a PvP 5v5 arena game, then a single-player game, to now an open-world game. So yeah, the direction has been literally like a roundabout. Except they're getting halfway around that circle, then turning around and going the other way because they're getting confused. There's just been so much misdirection within the direction of this game. And we actually had I think it's the current director, Elizabeth Pellon. She said the reason it went from being a PvP arena game of 5v5 to an open world is because in the PvP arena version of the game, there wasn't enough customization. So it's already set the expectation of there's going to be a lot of customizing in terms of skins for your ships and things things like that, which they have definitely followed through with. There are constant store updates with all these new bundles and stuff for their players to buy. But when it comes to the gameplay of Skull and Bones, the part of it that I actually enjoyed, which I think there is some bias in there, basically you start off in this tiny little, you can't even call it a ship, it's a little boat thing, it's called a dhow. You start off in your dhow, you're going around, you can hunt sharks and stuff, and you've got to do these little like fetch quests, and then you go and break into a big ship. You find the captain's dead, you basically get the location of St. Anne, and then you go to the actual game world. And then from there, pretty much all you're doing is the same stuff over and over again. You are interacting with the Kingpin, you are taking on quests, you are going here, taking down this ship, going here, doing this, going there, doing that. But I think the biggest reason people complain about the gameplay is because you have all of these different islands set up. And granted, there are outposts on the islands, but all you can do is get off your ship, walk around, find treasure, if you have a treasure map, get back on your ship after you've interacted with a couple of NPCs. There is no land combat in this game whatsoever. When you plunder a fort, when you plunder a settlement, it's simply just cutscenes. All you do is you start off the plunder, you attack ships and towers, and once you've gone through all of the stages, there is a tiny cutscene. When it comes to boarding enemy ships, there is a cutscene. When it comes to gathering materials, it's a quick time event. You just simply press a button, pull a trigger or whatever you want to call it, and you are going to cut down an acacia tree. There is no depth to the gameplay outside of your ship. You can't even leave your wheel and go and walk around your ship. You're supposed to have this crew that are on this adventure with you that are like manning your cannons and things like that, and you don't get to interact with any of them. All you do is sail around the oceans, going from outpost to outpost or den to den or whatever, doing quests for these kingpins, taking down enemies ships, and that is pretty much everything. There's a couple of PvP events. They've now got open world PvP, which made no difference to the game whatsoever. You basically just turn your flag on, you find a new server, so the players in that server have their flag on too. You go and take down enemy ships for no progression, no rewards, no nothing. It's just simply, if you want to get involved in that, you go and play it, have a bit of fun, but that is it. They also launched this game, being a full release, whether it's live service or not, it's a full release. They launched it with no large ships in the game, and they have stated that large ships will make an appearance when they are ready. So they need to go and rebalance all of the gameplay mechanics to fit these large ships into the game. So that might take a while. And besides the naval combat, there's nothing really, like besides the ship-to-ship combat, should I say, there's nothing really there. You have a ghost ship, and you have this monster, this creature that you go and attack, but there's literally just one, and they made variations of them for their seasonal content. Even if you load up Sea of Thieves, you're gonna have this massive kraken that comes along and attacks you. And it's a random event, it can happen at any time. Whereas in Skull and Bones, this ghost ship and this monster that they've got in the game are like a once per in-game day thing, and they've got specific locations. There might be multiple locations, but they're incredibly specific. So there's not really a lot going for Skull and Bones, because even when it comes to the thing they focused on, which is your naval combat, they still dropped a lot of features that a game from 11 years ago had. And overall, I do strongly feel that the gameplay is good, but good is all it is. There could have been a lot more with this game, but obviously with it being live service, they have set it up so that it becomes very grindy, because their ultimate goal is to keep players on the game as long as they possibly can, and that is something they are still failing with, because a lot of people have stopped covering this that did cover it towards like the launch of the game, like at the start of it, and people just rarely talk about this game anymore, and it's only been out for like 2 and a bit months, and it's already dead. Like granted, they've probably got a few thousand concurrent players, but I don't even think that's going to reach 5 figures. I don't think there's 10,000 concurrent players across all platforms. There's just so much more they could have done with this game. Even if it was only the last, like, they could have developed this whole game within 2 or 3 years. This is Ubisoft. All they ever do is put out open world games. They could have fully developed this, I'm going to say within 2 to 3 years. But after the 10, 11 years or so, after all of the direction changes, after all of the promises and inspiration and things like that, it's bound to leave a sour taste in your mouth. You're not going to enjoy playing this game if you've had the expectation of it being similar to Black Flag. And that's one thing I ignored before the game released, because I saw a lot of people talking about it, and I thought, well, I'm not going into the game expecting it to be anything like Black Flag, just so that I wasn't disappointed if it wasn't. And it turns out it's a more like watered down version of it. So I think with the mixed reception, the whole massive direction change thing, and like everything we've spoken about in this video, tie that in with the fact that it's live service, you get all the seasonal content and stuff, and that's why I believe it's been doomed since the very beginning. I strongly believe what Ubisoft are going to do is like bring a couple more features in, a couple of game modes or something that, like, I reckon a couple of them, or one of them at least, if they even do that, will be half-assed. I think they are going to give this game a year and then they are going to just chuck it into maintenance mode. They might continue seasons, rehashing stuff like they do with games like The Division 2, but I think his actual full post-launch development will last around a year. We'll get like 4 seasons of like okay-ish content coming to the game, and that'll be it. I reckon after a year, or like a year or so, they'll go into maintenance mode, and then a few years later, if there's like really, really small numbers, they'll just like shut the servers off and be done with it. I can't see this game ever picking up, ever becoming much better than what it currently is. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to complain. One, because Ubisoft gave me a free key. They also gave me a couple of giveaway keys, so I appreciate that. And two, because even if I did spend my own money to buy the game, I definitely got money's worth out of it. I played a good amount of hours, got all the way to the end game, like dipped my toes in the end game, which is really, really repetitive as well. But I did a little bit of that, got a lot of hours out of it, so I still feel I would have got value for my money if I did pay for and purchase the game myself. So I don't have gigantic complaints about the game. I feel a little bit like disappointed. They should have done a lot better with it. It's not even the fact they could have done, they should have done a lot better with it. But I believe the moment a game is modeled around live service and seasonal content is pretty much doomed anyway. There's only a couple of live service games out there that really survive. The model is just toxic within itself. So even though I don't really have any complaints, I know a lot of people do, and I wanted to cover this topic because it's really, really interesting to see the development of the game and how it came to be Skull and Bones, the thing that was initially supposed to be an expansion of Black Flag, that got its own IP, and ended up with features that are a lot more watered down than a game from 11 years ago. So that was how Skull and Bones was doomed from the very start. And what we're going to do is leave that video there. Let me know your thoughts and stuff about the game in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next one. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.